Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie, and I want to chat through some topics tonight that, frankly, I'd really appreciate your feedback on. I'm working through final edits of my book, and I want to talk about a couple of concepts that I have that, frankly, I really am still putting together, and this is the part of that the book is never done. And even just I was getting advice from a friend of mine literally 20 minutes ago, and they're like, you just got to get it out the door. And I'm trusting that it will be the right time when I get it out the door. And I'm also like, you're right. So I was editing the book earlier today based on what was given back to me, and I was reading just a couple pieces where I'm like, oh, that I felt like that could be more clear. And so I was sitting with chapter 6, and effectively I'm in this chapter diving into the topic that I want to talk about tonight. And it's really effectively the need to view first. We need to know pain. We need to know and like feel the the pain of realizing what we see in the mirror. It's not just when I lost my brother-in-law and then when I lost my husband by his leaving. It was I felt so much pain, but what I'm talking about is the pain of actually self-realization, the pain of waking up, the pain of looking in the mirror for the first time and being like, "Oh my gosh, that's what's there. That's the reality of who I am." But so that's number 1. Step number 2 is, okay, but you have to look at the full picture. Yes, pain is the first perhaps catalyst and perhaps even the first emotion that you might have, and like that discomfort of looking in the mirror and being like, I didn't know. So for me, I actually held this very pious view over the way I showed up in my marriage and the way that I loved him, the way that I in my perspective, everything in my life was for him and for my sister and her baby girl who lived with us, and for his family. Like, I just loved him and his world so much. But when I went back and was really desperate. So when we're kind of thinking like, what are the steps to knowing ourselves in this particular regard of waking up? There's a desperation that comes with this whole process of, yes, wanting to know the truth, but am I actually to this point of like emotionally compelled to know the truth? Because if we're just logically like, yeah, tell me what I did wrong, and we're emotionally disconnected and emotionally detached, we're probably actually not going to feel what we need to feel in order to then propel real change. Y'all, if we're content with how we show up and we're content with the way that we give to our kids and give to our partners and give in any kind of relationship, personal or professional, if we're content and we actually don't feel any kind of angst or pain over our current status and the current baseline of our lives, then we're never actually going to have real change or be compelled and driven. We have to feel it in our soul. We have to feel it in our body and in our mind. We have to feel the something needs to get better, something needs to change. It's not just a logical decision of, oh yes, I'm going to change this area of my life, especially when the change requires that something needs to die, because everything in us is going to push back and say, keep it the same way. We hate discomfort. Our bodies are programmed to avoid discomfort. That's where and why we have our nervous system kick into play anytime we feel any kind of threat to our status quo, because it's uncomfortable. It's actually discomfort. Like, we're actually not just at a kind of a neutrality around comfort or not. It's like, no, it's actually going to be uncomfortable. We know that. We know that there is discomfort involved in any amount of change. And so there's going to be resistance. So do I have the emotions to back up the real desire that I'm espousing logically, saying, yeah, I'm willing to change, but do I actually have the emotional drive and the emotional compulsion pushing me and propelling me forward so that when resistance rises, I can do the hard thing. I can actually say, no, I am so needing this to change in my life because I cannot take it anymore. So there's a desperation accompanying our willingness to look in the mirror. We have to want to know the truth. When I looked back on my 6.5 years of not healing from my brother-in-law's death, I realized I actually didn't want to heal in the first place. I said I did, but I actually, in my soul, I didn't want to. I felt like I would be betraying him. I felt like it felt unfair to move on with my life. There were all those narratives that frankly I've heard a lot of people who have experienced loss in like a physical form. There's the emotional loss, and then there's also a physical loss where the person is physically like they're no longer here on the earth, whereas somebody has it's like grieving the living. We don't talk about that a lot. We talk much more so grieving those who have passed. And so as I talk with those who grieve those who have passed on, they talk a lot about the betrayal of what it is to continue on with life and be full and happy and vibrant, especially, man, it's like if my kid dies and then I have the audacity to live fully and brightly after that. How could I? A piece of me die, all of those narratives. And it's really, really important that we look in the mirror with that question. And so for me, I realized that for 6.5 years, did not want to. I did not have the emotion to back and support my logical statement of, yes, I know I need to heal from this. And so because of that, I remained permanently stuck in the past. So my present life was moving forward and I was 6.5 years back there. And that's how it works. For so many of the areas that we have chosen not to heal from, we are emotionally stuck at that age, at that time in our life for that category. And so when we talk about the need for healing, this is part of the reason is so that we're actually all of our experiences, all of our ages, all of us is moving in one like continuous through line forward into the future. It's not parts of me are back there, but parts of me are here and parts of me are way back there. We're all like here and present and accounted for, sir. um, so with this whole conversation around, yes, why we need to heal, we need to have an emotion associated with whatever it is that's coming out of our mouth. Do we actually want it at the end of the day? And to that point, then, when we have that deep desire to see something change along with the action, man, that's powerful. And that's really what's going to propel us forward to see real change. So we have to then feel the pain. So that's kind of some context to this whole, okay, this is now where we're starting. I have to be willing to know the pain of what I see looking back at me. I have to be willing to know the pain of the discomfort that I feel over the current status quo of my life. I have to be willing to feel it, sense it, touch it, taste it. I have to viscerally encounter the pain in order to then viscerally see change and thus viscerally experience what's on the other side of that, the growth, the healing, the joy, the freedom. And so in that process, this is where my chapter kind of dives into it. So leading up chapters 4 and 5, I set the stage for everything I just shared. Chapter 6, I now bring in this other aspect of, and in addition to being willing to see the pain and feel the pain and see the darkness, let's say, of whatever is staring back at us, it is so critically important that we are also willing to see the beauty, because for every shadow, there is a greater light. So the things that we're looking at, staring at us in the mirror that are like, oh my gosh, like I remember looking in the mirror and being like, man, I was existing as a non-person. No wonder he left. So then what's the light there, right? So I could just fixate on that, and I could fixate on all the other areas of my imperfections, no matter how big or small, and just be so absorbed with every area that I'm failing, that I'm not doing well, that I need to grow in. And it's just like downward spiral effectively, because if we're just so focused on the pain, man, it can quickly lead to nihilism. So then what does it look like to bring the beauty in and balance out all of that we're seeing and feeling the pain of that? What does it look like then to see the beauty? And there's the premise of these chapters, it's actually predicated on a quote from Jordan Peterson. And I have the book in front of me, so I'm pulling up that quote because I heard these chapters all took place because of an experience I had listening to a podcast. Lex Friedman interviewed Dr. Jordan Peterson 3 years ago, and it's about a 2.5 hour, 3 hour podcast. So good. I've listened to it, I think 3 times now. Um, so a couple years ago, this this conversation, this little blip I'm about to read is what inspired these couple of chapters. So Peterson rhetorically posed the question, what's the most real of what matters? How about pain? And then he went on, why is pain the most real? He said, try arguing it away. Good luck. So pain is the fundamental reality. Is there anything more fundamental than pain? Love. And then he says, really, oh, I get chills. He says, really, if you're in pain, love and truth, that's what you've got. And he like is getting misty-eyed as he's talking. And man, I just have chills now thinking about that because I know that in the deepest pain, that there is a deeper level and there's a deeper level of a foundation of what's true and almost also like a higher transcendent truth. So the pain that we feel, whether it's emotional pain, whether it's the pain that we're looking at in the mirror and being like, I cannot believe that I've let my life get to this point, there's a more fundamental reality than that pain, and that's love. And so I really was, and I have been leaning into this for the last couple of years, um, ebbing and flowing, right? And frankly, man, I actually, this is interesting thinking about this now, and maybe I'll even add this into the chapter. Alchemy is one of my very favorite things. It is a core value of mine. I was actually talking with a client earlier this week. We do a fractional CMO work for them. They're in the trades, and I was talking to him about just that's alchemy, the not just the ability, but a deep desire. Again, you got to have the emotional desire, not just saying, I can do this or I want to do this, but you actually have a real emotion driven desire because then real tangible action follows. I have a deep desire to make ordinary moments something magical, to take what most people would walk right by and be like, oh my gosh, look at how beautiful. I want to do it in people. I want to do it in places. I want to do it in the fact that, I was walking through my neighborhood the other day, and for whatever reason, there's pink roses budding and blooming right now in November. And I'm like, what is going on? It's so pretty. Yesterday I was at the Christmas fair with my sisters, and there's pink roses. And I have no idea why. It's so cold. But that's magic. That's magic in what most people would pass right by, and I want to train my eyes to see the world through those lenses. And we have the ability to do that so long as love is a more fundamental reality than pain. Because I actually went through probably about 12 to maybe 16 months of just every day, almost like every moment, like just looking in the mirror, like, oh my gosh, look at that, look at that, look at that. Because I had to wake up from this very pious view I had of myself for so long. And here's the thing, it was pious based on what KPI, what key performance indicator, right? I actually didn't do anything that I regretted. I didn't in some way, one metric, like the way that maybe I don't know. I'm trying to think. In a way that, okay, here it is. The way that my church kept score, I was doing great. The way my parents kept score, I was doing great. The way that kept score at the time, I was doing great. I was really like loving other people as best as I knew how. And that's where love actually needs to be that fundamental reality, because if I'm looking at it just through the eyes of, it's either love or fear. And so often judgment is the manifestation, and the mouthpiece of judgment often is shame. So it's like shame and judgment rooted in fear as I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, holy cow, I've lived, as I wake up, I realize, oh my gosh, there's all these other KPIs that I should take into account for how I live my life. I haven't lived that way for 28 years. I am such, and then the shame narrative kicks in. I am such a failure. I cannot believe I was so blind. I can't believe I was so naive. Judgment, shame, judgment, shame. And man, it's just so negative. And it's because it's coming from, I'm feeling the emotional pain propelling me and desiring me to change, But we can't stop at feeling the pain. We actually need to get to a more fundamental reality. And that's what Jordan Peterson is talking about. We have to get to the level of love. So this is the first part of the chapter. Then I move on to a quote by Viktor Frankl. And it's a beautiful, beautiful quote. And I think he captures this so beautifully. So to this point of love and truth is a more fundamental reality than pain. Viktor Frankl wrote this. So this is on the heels of him losing his wife and his, all he knew his entire life. Like, he knew that he was sentenced to die at some point. So he writes this. A thought transfixed me. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers, the truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which a man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief ever have to impart. The salvation of humans is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in the world still may know bliss. Dude, be it only for a brief moment in the contemplation of his beloved, in a position of utter desolation when a man cannot express himself in positive action, when his only achievement may consist of enduring his suffering in the right way, an honorable way. In such a position, man can, through loving contemplation of the image he carries of his beloved, achieve fulfillment. For the first time in my life, he says, I was able to understand the meaning of the words, the angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of an infinite glory. Chills all over. Y'all, so this man, if we could figure out how to exist in, I don't think many of us, I'm thinking of some people in different countries right now that are probably experiencing this level of suffering. But for many of us, not even a drop in the bucket to what he experienced. And man, if he can do this, if he can master this ability to love in the midst of suffering, then it's possible for us 100%. And so I take this concept and this is the direction I go with it. And I just really would love your feedback, because I'm wondering what is missing or what's not making sense, or where could I really amplify this? Love is the greater reality, but it's predicated in truth. He says that right at the beginning. He says, I finally understand the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers, the truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which a man can aspire. Love is the ultimate goal, but it's laced in, like, that's the truth. And so effectively, the next portion of this is the understanding that if we want to move through love and be in love, well, then where does that start from? What's the source of that? Because here's what got me with this. And this was just as I was leaning into the quote, it's like, okay, if he's fixated on his wife, if he's fixated on God, that's still something outside of us. And so I kind of went down a rabbit trail for myself. So let's say he gets out, he sees his wife, and she had been cheating on him. He's heartbroken, right? So that love now is damaged, but he had been giving all this love, and the purity of it now is no longer intact. So that's kind of case number one. If we're giving all this love to somebody and then they turn against us, or it doesn't work out or something, even still, like, even if they die, it's like, still, what do you do with all that love? And then next, you've got loving God. Well, I know so many people who fervently gave their lives to God and end up just being like, dude, you betrayed me. How could you let this happen, this happen, this happen, this happen? How could people be suffering over here? How could a good God? All these questions. Yet they once were espousing so much love. So there's a disconnect. If love is moving through and in, well, right now, with all those examples, and we all know this for ourselves and for other people. So then what does it look like for us to be in love and having love flowing through us? Well, as I was really diving in, there was just this realization that in us first feeling the pain, what that does is that pain is so visceral that it actually starts like causing action. We start hollowing out the caverns of our soul and we start clearing away the things that were old, things that need to be removed, things that are not us anyways, things that were handed down to us, things we inherited, things that we learned, things that were modeled for us, and we just start kind of like clearing out the house. We're clearing out with all the things that like dead wood. It needed to be burned off anyways. Let's just clear it out. And as we clear it out, what ends up happening is that in that process, we're actually creating a space and a new capacity and deepening in the scooping out. We're actually deepening. We're creating a more hollow ground for something else to fill it. And so then in that process, and y'all, I experience this every single time, is that as I'm in this process of effectively like purification, all of a sudden I have a much more streamlined access to the divine because he is pure. And so if I've got impurities, which is maybe it's honestly, I'm just thinking about how for so long my metric and KPI of spirituality was so off because it was based on what other people told me it should be. It wasn't what I believed. It wasn't what I really created for myself. And so as I started to do the work to know who I am, I started to create my own KPIs of how would I actually want to engage with God? How would I actually want to engage with other people? So as I start creating space, start creating my ideals, start getting rid of everything that needs to go, now I all of a sudden have space for God to come in. Now there's an in, and when I even say come in, I actually think he's already there. I think there's a scripture, and on Sundays we talk about spiritual intelligence, hence the theme today. Y'all, there's a verse that says Christ is in all. Carl Jung says Christ is in all. Marianne Williamson says Christ is in all. There is multitude of text that point to Christ being in all. And we see it. We see splinters of God in every person, don't we? Like it's so beautiful. It's so vibrant to see people come alive because I'm like, oh, I see God in you. Like the creator is in you as you create. It's so beautiful to witness. So as we start creating space, now love begins to speak out. Now love begins to manifest. And then it's like the wellspring within us is being so filled with new life that it's filling our cup and filling our oxygen and filling the gas in our tank, that the natural overflow is love. There's another biblical text that says, "You shall know a tree by its fruit." So as we are eliminating all the dead wood, eliminating all the dross, we're actually allowing for new fruit to come forth because we're actually getting in touch with our spirit, we're getting in touch with our soul and getting in touch with ourselves. So the knowing the pain is actually part of, this whole book is predicated on doing the deep inner work. And there's 28 chapters where we talk about it and what does that look like. And so this chapter that I'm talking about right now is in the first section, which is effectively about descending into the soul and doing the work and squaring off with the truth. And all of that has to take place before you really seek to change. And so as you're squaring off with the truth, as you're realizing, as you're like, oh gosh, I that's not me. That's not me. I don't know what's going to take its place yet. So before you really start to have the real change, we're clearing away. And as we then start to activate ourself, our soul, our spirit, and we start listening, then we start hearing not just from ourselves, but we also start hearing from God. Because there is a recovery of the intuition that we silenced and we exchanged for the voice of our parent, priest, peer, or partner. And so as we eliminate their voices or just turn them down, maybe they're not gone completely, but just dim them a little bit, now there's actually space for intuition to rise to the surface and have something to say and the voice of God. And in that, there's now just like a filling of love. And now we're actually starting to move into the next phase of knowing, which is okay, now it's time to set new targets and create new ideals. But it's propelled in love now, not judgment. And so, this whole concept of we have to see the beauty, we have to see the light in addition to the dark and the shadow, that is ultimately only really possible if we're coming from a position of love. So this is where the chapter is right now. It's hard to put into words. I was talking about the book with a friend of mine earlier, and they really are like, just ship it, just get it out the door. Jordan Peterson worked so long. I believe it was on Maps of Meaning, but it was 12 Rules for Life that really hit the ground running. And he posted that initially as a Reddit thread. So I'm like, this is part of the letting go, right? That I've been reading with David Hawkins. So I'm excited. My goal is to finish it this week, finish the edits. And, I've been adding to it, not terribly. I'm not rewriting the book this time, which is good. But yeah, y'all, I'm really looking for, this is so much of my mission. This is really what I feel called to, is the ongoing cultivation of my own knowing, for the purpose of being able to give this away. I'm actually going to be turning knowing into a nonprofit because I hate charging people. For a while, I thought I just had to hang up with sales. And I'm realizing now, like, no, I really just have a firm belief everyone should have access to this. Now, I know that there's a psychological connection when people pay, they're more bought in, etc. So I'm working out the details there, and I need to obviously make money from this. So let me know if you have any ideas. I've done workshops. I've worked with teams. I've done the knowing retreats. I've got 3 actually coming up, 2 in January and 1 in February. And I'm starting to partner with different communities where they're either doing it in person or the individual ones where I'm hosting. But with the communities, it's either workshops or in-person events, and then also doing one-to-ones with businesses and founders for a couple of days called the Knowing Intensive. So there's so many different ways that this manifests. We're moving into a new age. We're moving into a new age with AI coming in. More and more people are starting to ask the questions around emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence than ever before. I've been really surprised at the content that really resonates with folks. It's not necessarily the business ones, it's the relationship ones and the spiritual ones. People are really hungry. And so my prediction for 2026 is that we are moving into an experiential age in a way that we never have before. And we need to be ready as leaders. Do we know who we are? Do we actually have clarity on the type of experience we want to deliver for our families, for our partners, for our businesses, for our customers? Y'all, there's something around, we're telling our kids, like, oh, don't be on the phone so much, like disconnect from screens. One, can we even do that ourselves? And then 2, are we giving them another alternative? Like, are we actually creating a memorable childhood for them when we take away the screens? It really is medication for all of us. It's so easy. So that's my challenge for myself. That's the direction I'm heading with knowing, is to pursue the cultivation of obviously knowing who we are, bringing play into it and bringing experiences into it, both on, working on the individual side, but then also with businesses. We're doing a whole big campaign right now for one of our clients where we're bringing an experiential element for their holidays for their clients. And we need more experiences, more touch points, more communication, honestly, more human to human connection than ever before. So I know with knowing there's so many different ways that this can manifest. So I feel peaceful, and I don't feel an urgency. I actually started the year in very opposite. I was at Genius Network, Joe Polish's place, and someone reflected back to me. They were like, "I hear a sense of urgency in your voice," and I was like, "Yeah, time's running out." And now I'm like, I'm right on schedule. you know, like, as long as I'm getting aligned every day, and because obviously we can all veer off track. So I feel peaceful now. There actually have been moments that I have veered off track this year, and I know very clearly when they were. And I actually have, I think, I want to say, suffered the consequences, because I think for every one of us, when we don't obey, there's a consequence, whether it's obeying our intuition, obeying the voice of God, obeying what we know that's right. We don't need something else to tell us. We just know inherently that that's what we should do. Um, we know we've got data that that's what we should do. We don't need a sign from heaven to do the right thing so often. So I feel good ending the year. And I also am just super, very open. So I would love if you send a DM. I would be so grateful. I'm really, really open to what could come about for 2026. And especially with the book too. I was thinking of there's just I'm putting a lot of exercises in it because again, this isn't a back end upsell. It's not this isn't a funnel lead. Like, I really want people to read the book, but I also know it's complicated right now. So I'm like, how do I just I'm hoping the editors on the back end will just like strip my words and make it super easy. But my hope is that we can do some kind of book club for a couple weeks or months in the weeks and months that follow it coming out. So, or maybe even leading up to it. I don't know. So, anyways, so many potential ideas. I mean, obviously I'm a marketer and brander, so I honestly kind of overwhelm myself. So if you have any thoughts, I'd be so grateful to hear. Any thoughts on the chapter, any thoughts on the book, or just knowing in general, I would love to know. And thank you so much for following along.